Now, through the years, after John Chrysostom was buried, he didn't even have peace in death. As I mentioned, John Chrysostom died in Comana in 407. His relics remained there until 438. 34 years later, after John's chief enemies had died, his relics were brought back to Constantinople. Emperor Theodosius II, the son of Arcadius and Eudoxia, that famous empress, publicly asked forgiveness for the sins of his parents. Most of John's relics were looted from Constantinople by the Crusaders in the Fourth Crusade in 1204 and taken to Rome. Now, it depends which history you read, okay? Because if you read the Roman Catholic history, they were rescued. If you read the Orthodox history, they were stolen. Okay. However, now stop and think about it. Like I said, God has a reason for all things. As you know, the Byzantium fell to the Muslim Turks in 1453, so who knows what would have happened to those relics during that period. So, however, that still left a big psychological and spiritual wound among the Byzantines, especially the Orthodox, down to our present day. Some of his bones, relics, were returned to the Orthodox in Istanbul. Of course, Constantinople is now Istanbul, Turkey, on November 27, 2004, by Pope John Paul II. They are enshrined at the Church of St. George in Istanbul, and I had the honor of going there 2 years ago, and I saw them. However, poor John Chrysostom, he's all over. His skull is kept at Vatopeti Monastery on Mount Athos in northern Greece. And, let's see, some of the other relics are in Russia. In 1693, having received a request from Vatopeti Monastery for the return of John's skull, Tsar Peter the Great ordered that the skull would remain in Russia, but the monastery was paid 500 rubles every 4 years for that honor, and that payment was kept up to 1735. Okay. In 1920, the Soviets confiscated the skull and moved it to the Museum of Silver Antiquities. In 1988, in connection with the 1000th anniversary of the baptism of Rus Kiev, the head, together with other important relics, was returned to the Russian Orthodox Church and kept at Epiphany Cathedral until being moved to the Cathedral of Christ the Savior in Moscow after its restoration. The right hand of John Chrysostom is still preserved on Mount Athos, and there are numerous smaller relics throughout the world. However, November 2004, the sacred relics of two renowned archbishops of Constantinople, two saints of our church, were solemnly restored to the Ecumenical Patriarchate, St. Gregory the Theologian, or St. Gregory Nazianzus, same person, and St. John Chrysostom. His All-Holiness, the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew I, presided over a service of thanksgiving for the return and reception during the thronal feast of St. Andrew, the first called Apostle. So this historic occasion was the celebration and a conclusion of a series of very painful as well as joyful events. So the two saints served as archbishops of Constantinople during the late 4th and 5th centuries. It was a very creative period for Christian theology and also for liturgy. St. Gregory was regarded as the theologian par excellence, delivering 5 extraordinary theological orations on the Holy Trinity and preparing the way for the triumph of orthodoxy during the Second Ecumenical Council in 381, which completed the symbol of faith, the Creed as we know it. And St. John Chrysostom patron saint of preachers, and all of his wonderful works, and all that he really stands for in the Byzantine history is now returned to Istanbul, to Constantinople. In the early 1960s, in an act of fraternal fellowship, Pope Paul VI returned the sacred relics of certain saints belonging to the Orthodox Church, including those of St. Andrew, and then to Patras and St. Mark, which were preserved in Venice, to the Coptic Church in Egypt. So in 1980, a dialogue of truth was marked by the commencement of theological discussions between the two churches. In June 2004, the Ecumenical Patriarch attended the patronal feast of the Roman Catholic Church, June 29th. While the invitation is extended each year, the Ecumenical Patriarch is represented annually, and that year also marked the 40th anniversary since this inception of the Dialogue of Love that was established so many years ago. And it was also the 800th anniversary since that Fourth Crusade. So on that occasion, Pope John Paul II officially apologized for the tragic events of that crusade, of the Fourth Crusade. In response, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew observed that no material compensation was at that time appropriate, but the rightful return of the sacred relics of the two archbishops of Constantinople would comprise a spiritual restoration of the Church's legacy. And so that was what was set up, and then I think we're going to have a video of that in a minute. He's already ready. Now, what goes on each year, on June 29th, the Pope always invites the Patriarch of Constantinople to Rome for the Feast of Peter and Paul. And then on November 30th, the Patriarch of Constantinople always invites the Pope or his representatives to Constantinople. And they use the ancient terms. The Pope is Bishop of Old Rome. The Patriarch of Constantinople, on your history map, what is he? New Rome. Okay. In fact, if you get any correspondence, or you see in the Greek Orthodox papers, official documents, it'll say, His All Holiness Bartholomew is Patriarch of New Rome. So you know what he's talking about. Okay? So, what we are going to see is a wonderful, wonderful, tremendous act of healing, and also a great restoration when the Patriarch went to Rome and the Pope giving the relics back. Before we start, any questions? Yes?
I have a question. So Bartholomew is actually Orthodox, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you can explain to me the break off of Orthodoxy to Byzantium. When did that occur?
Okay. For the sake of our recording, she asked the clarification of when the separation of Orthodoxy and the Western Church. We could do another, believe me, I did an 8-week course on this question alone. It happened officially in 1054, but it's never that immediate. There were a lot of centuries building up to this. Because prior to this, the churches were in communion with one another. When a new bishop or a new patriarch was elected, they sent letters of communion to the others to be recognized and accept communion. That's why excommunication means out of communion. All right? And so what happened officially in 1054, the Pope sends legates to Constantinople, slams an edict of excommunication on the altar. The Patriarch of Constantinople goes back to Rome and slaps it on them. So since 1054 up till now, we've been apart. Now that's a very simplistic, right? Believe me, there's a lot of history, and believe me, more politics and theology that led up to this. Father Deacon.
Well, I was going to mention the fact that since the Cardinal Humbert, the Pope who had sent him, had already died.
Well, that's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, his edict was meaningless.
That was when I taught the class. I taught that Yeah, the legate that the Pope sent to put this excommunication on the altar, the Pope died in the process of, remember, it's not instant
Right.
travel like we have today. It took months and months and months. Well, the Pope who issued it died. So, so it makes it kind of invalid, but what are you going to do? Okay? But that was just getting your feet wet about John Chrysostom. But I mean, do you get a feel for the real lived world situation, the world, the church, and and why we use the term Byzantine as being surreptitious and devious and all those other adjectives that I gave you at the beginning?
I love the homily where he was complaining, please don't come to church drunk from the parties and come immediately into church.
Yes. Oh yeah. Some of his homilies, and they're readily available even online. There's a lot of free stuff out there. We're lucky that if you have eyes that could read this, his homilies in English. And oh yeah, some of the things, he goes on and on pages about stuff. What really got your dander up that day? But, he would go like 3 and 4 pages on the evils of going to the theater. Okay. Well, of course, theaters back then were actually brothels and cross-dressing and all these other things. But
I think they were really next to her.
Yeah.
Oh, and circuses, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Theaters and circuses, oh boy, that really set him off. Okay. Any other questions before we start the video? I could have been that clear. All right, well then, we'll now go to Rome and to Constantinople or Istanbul for the restoration of the relics.